Half moon is one of my favorite yoga poses, but I also like practicing variations of half moon that add on a little more challenge and a little more load to the pose. So here I will feature my three favorite half moon variations for adding load and challenge. And just know that it's going to be a little bit of a anatomy and biomechanics geeky look at these three poses. So just know that ahead of time. It's hard for me to look at movement and not get a little bit geeky about it. But let's turn our attention to the first half moon variation that I love. My first favorite half moon variation that adds a little more challenge and load to the pose is a half moon squat. And here is what it looks like. We are in half moon, but then we bring our hands in front of our heart and we bend our standing knee and straighten it once again. So we lower down and we lift up. And basically, this is like a single leg squat, but kind of like in the frontal plane. And it's great because, well, it adds dynamic movement to half moon, but it also loads the quadriceps on that standing leg. So they have to work in order, they work eccentrically to lower us and concentrically to lift us. So we are adding some more load into half moon. So if our goal for like a half moon variation is just some half moon like novelty and changing things up and maybe bringing in some more load, then I think the half moon squat is an excellent choice. However, I might be throwing things for a little bit of a loop here, but I'm just going to say that if our goal in the half moon squat is actually to effectively build strength, like say in the standing leg, to like really truly strengthen those quads, then I would suggest that doing so in a half moon squat is probably not the best way to go about doing so or the most effective way. And that's because half moon is a yoga pose of inherent instability. So I know we all probably know that half moon is a balance challenge. It is tough to hold our balance here. And we know from strength science, exercise science, we know that strength exercises that have more of a stability challenge, like that are just less stable by nature, they have less ability to truly build like our maximum strength. We simply can't produce as much force in our muscles when our position is also challenged stability wise. So, with all of that said, I just want to say that if our real goal in that half moon squat is to strengthen the quadriceps, then I would suggest something different. Which let's just say, so here's the half moon squat. We're in a position of this standing hip is basically in horizontal abduction, but also external rotation. So it's kind of a combination of those two positions here. So say we want to strengthen that leg in horizontal abduction with some external rotation. A more effective way to probably do that would be to have both feet on the floor in a wide-legged squat position. So you can, and body weight like I'm showing right now would not be the best way because that's not enough load, but I'm just showing this for the position. So maybe you can sort of see that this leg position, I'm doing it, it's both legs now instead of one, but it's mimicking, it's similar to that half moon position when I was on one leg and I was bending. See, it's like similar, but here I have 2 feet down. This is much more stable. And that's going to allow my muscles to work more. And like I said, body weight position, doing this body weight is probably not enough to really build strength. But if we were to add load, like this kettlebell, something like this, and then we squat down. And this, in yoga, we sometimes hear this called horse stance or goddess stance. Usually it's body weight in a yoga context, but if our goal is really strength, that's what I would suggest. So half moon squat as a fun, a novel, and a challenging variation of half moon. Yes, in a yoga context, I love it. But if it's truly for strength building, I'd suggest a more stable position and then adding some load. My second favorite half moon variation for adding challenge and more load to the pose is half moon to warrior 3 rotations. So here we are in half moon, and then we rotate into warrior three pose, and we rotate back to half moon. So this is challenging my standing hip. The lateral hip muscles on the standing hip, they work to rotate me in between those two positions. So I love that rotating in between half moon and warrior three. As a side note, I'll just point out that you may have heard in the yoga world there's an old school rule kicking around that rotating in between those two poses, or in between closed and open hips in general, this old school rule that's somehow bad. But that's just a bunch of biomechanical BS, and we don't need to listen to that or worry about it. There's nothing inherently bad about rotating between these two poses. In fact, it has the potential to be strengthening. And this same movement between these two joint positions in the fitness and in the rehab worlds, that's like a classic exercise that's often taught. It's called a hip airplane in those realms. And it's used for targeting that lateral hip for some strength. So anyway, I have a whole separate video about that issue, about how this transition is actually safe. We don't need to fearmonger about it, but I just wanted to say that here. So anyway, I love that as a half moon variation in which we integrate warrior three, and it's dynamic, it's great. And then just to kind of go back to what I was saying with the half moon squat, and how if our goal is truly strength, in that example I suggested, well, then we might want to do something similar but more stable. And in this example, I would say similar. I would suggest something similar, but I don't think we would really need to really change the position that much. But I do think that if we're trying to do this in the middle of the room, we have quite a bit of a stability challenge here. And again, that's going to hold us back as far as how much force we can produce and, potential strengthening there is. So I'd suggest, if our goal is just changing up half moon and having, fun and novelty, then try it in the middle of the room. It's great. Incorporate it into your yoga practice that way. But if your goal really is to strengthen that hip, then I would suggest bringing in, making some change to make it a little more stable, so it's not such an unstable position. So that would mean maybe doing it by the wall, and just having, I have my hand on the wall here, and that is helping with my balance. Or you could have your hand on a chair, the back of the chair, and just have a balance aid. Or we could do it with the back foot on the floor, and then similar motion. Here's the open hip variation, here's the closed hip, and this is a similar movement. You could even hinge forward so that it felt a little bit more like warrior three and half moon. And your yoga movement eyes probably can see that what I'm demonstrating here is something like high lunge to warrior two, something like that. High lunge to warrior two, rotating at that hip. So anyway, those are ideas that would target that hip in a similar but probably more effective way for strength in a similar movement. But if we just want to have fun in half moon and change things up and add some load for sure, then completely in the middle of the room doing this rotation is great. My third favorite half moon variation for adding a little more challenge and load is half moon leg lifts. And here is what it looks like. We take a resistance band. We would anchor the band underneath our standing foot, and then we loop the band around the foot of our lifted leg. Then we come into our half moon position and we lift up against the resistance of the band and we lower. So these are dynamic leg lifts in our half moon position. And because we're working against the resistance of the band, that's going to ask these hip abductor muscles of that lifted leg to work more. So this is yet another great way to change things up in half moon. We add dynamic movement and we add resistance in the form of the resistance band. Now, just along the lines of the other two half moon variations that I covered, and how I talked about, if we really truly want to build strength in a very effective way, that half moon may not be the best position for that because it's inherently less of a stable position. So along those lines, I would suggest that if our goal in those half moon leg lifts is to truly, like really effectively strengthen these hip abductor muscles, then maybe a more stable position would be preferable. And here's one that I like. So in this one, we are going to change the movement quite a bit. This would be forearm side plank. So now we come down, we're low to the ground, and then I have more like footprint on the floor in the form of my forearm and then my outside edge of my bottom foot. And then this is forearm side plank leg raises. So this is a more stable position. It's not totally stable, right? Because we know that in side plank there is some instability too. But it's a more stable position than being all the way up in half moon with everything reaching out and then we're lifting the leg. Here close to the floor and more points of contact with the floor or greater surface area, this would be more stable. So I really like forearm side plank leg lifts. And just to point out that we're not only targeting the hip abductors of this moving leg, but we're also, and really maybe more so, we are targeting the hip abductors of the bottom leg isometrically. So these have to work here to hold me up. If they weren't working, I would dip down, but I'm holding up. And then when I lift the leg, that loads that outer hip even more. So anyway, this is just me throwing things for a loop and suggesting that if our real goal is to target the hip abductors, maybe choose something a little more stable, a position of more stability than half moon. But if our goal is just to practice a fun half moon variation and maybe add some load and definitely novelty, then the half moon leg lift is excellent. So those are my 3 favorite half moon variations explained in a anatomy, biomechanics, slightly geeky way. I hope you enjoyed, and if you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so that you can stay up to date on all of the content that I share.